Hey, it's your boy Cosmic here, and today I wanted to answer a question I've been asking for a while. Is old viable? Now, to some of you, the answer to this might seem like an obvious no, but out of all the low tiers in this game, old is the one that I genuinely think has a lot of potential, and I could see this being another gel situation where a character previously thought to be unviable is shown to have had immense potential the whole time. Now, before we get started, I just want to clarify something. Since old's attack names are all Attack 1, Attack 2, etc., I'll be referring to them by the inputs, so if you don't know what a 5A is, this video might be a little confusing. But anyway, moving on from the boring introduction part, nobody likes, let's get into the actual video. So I'm gonna start by going over old's moveset. 4AB gives you this move, which I assume will be a decent long-range anti-air, and could also be good for preventing ground approaches. It's actually a really good move for two reasons. The first being that it knocks opponents back to full screen range, and a large part of old's game plan consists of keeping them out. It's also really fast, meaning you can throw it out with little risk. Even if opponents block it, they probably won't be able to punch effectively, so old can continue to keep them out after that. Moving on to a much worse move, 6AB does this. Since it's slower and has less range, 4AB is almost always a better choice than this, but I could see it being used in neutral to give opponents a hard time getting in. I'd also say it would be a good anti-air if 4-6A didn't exist. This move is, put simply, very good. It's fast, works really well as an anti-air, and covers a large amount of space in front of old. It's basically 6AB, but better in every way. The last special old has is 2A. This one isn't as good as 4-6A or 4AB, but it still has its uses, mainly for block pressure. It can hit multiple times on block, making it an effective tool for getting opponents away from old. Its main weakness being that it only covers ground space, so it's easy to jump in on old during it, and it's sometimes negative on hit, although given the fact that it puts the opponent back at 3/4 screen range, how bad this is will depend on the matchup. I won't go over his normals for now, since they're not very relevant, but just know that sweep is a good move generally, and GP can be used as an anti-air if you don't have time to do the input for 4-6A. Anyway, now to get some information on how good he is. I've decided to structure this similarly to the Nay video, where I'll play a couple games as him versus the CPU, and try and find cool stuff in training mode on day 1, and if possible play against a real person on day 2. Well, it's only day 1, and I haven't played a single game as old yet, but I've already found something interesting with him. He can store the input for 4-6A temporarily. As you can see here on the controller display, I can use the move despite not having done the input. I can also do back and then hold forward to walk for a while, press A, and have the move come out without any trouble. I don't know how this could be used yet, and the input can't be held for more than a full second, but I get the feeling that this alone should move old up a few spots on the tier list. So for day 1, I tried playing versus the CPU, and yeah, it didn't go too well. I was eventually able to win a few rounds though, and I think I got the hang of old's gameplay. Basically, you want to use this as an anti-air and for controlling space. This is both a get-off-me tool as a long-range and a long-range anti-air. Sweep for when you can't do the inputs consistently, and these two moves... never! Also, GP goes over most characters' heads, so that's kind of annoying. Overall, so far, I think old is a fairly standard defensive character, maybe low or mid B tier. However, one thing I think really holds him back, and it's part of the reason why everyone put him in C tier for so long, is just how difficult he is to play well. Most of his inputs are quite difficult, at least by this game's standards, and even then, most of his moves are situational enough that knowing when to use them can be difficult for people who aren't used to how old functions. He also doesn't have great damage, meaning he has to keep people out for much longer than characters like Ashura or Ghost Sun. He's a character with a high skill floor and a higher skill ceiling, so when most people give him a look because they're making a tier list, all they see is the character at his worst, not what he can do. He's a bit like Star in that regard, actually. And now for the part where I play against an actual human, in this case Refreshing Lemonade, and I tell you what I think after that. That was disappointing. So yeah, I played 6 rounds versus RL, 3 of which I played old during, and 3 of which were just for fun. And to nobody's surprise, I lost every single round where I played old, and this was against someone who I consider myself to be around the same skill level as. Needless to say, my opinion has shifted from he's probably viable to if he is viable, he's the worst viable character in the game, and allow me to explain why. I think the problem with old is that he's a little too linear. If you look at all the other characters like him that are higher on the tier list, they all have something they can do that isn't zoning from 3/4 screen range. Ashura can punish opponents for jumping back and can easily pressure them with GP. Ghost Sun can force opponents to come closer with projectiles, and Jibber... well, Jibber can't do anything else either, but he has much better hypothetical space control and is really good at what he does. Old also has really bad matchups against most of the high tiers, meaning that even a great old player won't be able to solo win a tournament with him. Hey, it's your boy Post-Editing Cosmic, and this isn't really anything to do with the rest of the video, but I love how I was just able to get away with using Stardust so many times versus RL's Eye, and it was really funny. Yeah, that was it really, back to the video. Another thing I think holds me to lose is the fact that old is just not a character who's placed to I enjoy. I tend to enjoy characters with a focus on pressuring opponents into making mistakes and punishing with various different mix-ups. It's why the two characters I play the most are Star and Legend. Old has no pressure options, and while I could see the input storage on 468 giving him decent mix-up potential, it's not something Old is really built around. He's more focused on playing a slow, cautious zoning game, which is just not something I enjoy, so I'm much less likely to be able to utilize him at his full potential. However, I do still think he could be viable. He would definitely be a C tier character, yes, and not a character who could solo win a tournament, but definitely viable. If what I've described as this character sounds like the kind of thing you'd enjoy, please pick him up. I really want to see what he would look like in the hands of someone who could utilize his potential to the fullest, and I'm just not someone who could do that. I'll also be leaving a link to the mostly unedited footage of my Games vs. RL in the description, in case anyone wants to just watch some relatively high-level JMF gameplay. It also might make for good background footage, I don't know, I mean, you can see a bit of his desktop in the background, so that's not great, but I've been using it the whole time and it's worked decently well, so... Then I realized that I was on Wi-Fi the whole time.